Will Billy Turner make his debut for the Denver Broncos tonight on Thursday Night Football? He comes into the game as questionable. Plus, we take a look at some of the other key injuries. And can the Broncos avoid the Thursday Night Football trap that they fell into last year as former Bronco Phillip Lindsay suits up for the Colts? We dive into that and much more in today's bonus episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a bonus episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format, or whether you're watching us on YouTube. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside, as always, by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. We're leading you up to kickoff tonight when the Broncos host the Indianapolis Colts Thursday Night Football. Yesterday's episode, we had dropped a crossover Thursday. Well, now we're going to go through a little bit of a bonus episode here on the podcast, highlighting some of the injury statuses heading into tonight's matchup and also posing the question, will Billy Turner make his debut for the Broncos? So, Sayre, let's really kind of open things up. Let's talk about who is out for this Denver Broncos football team tonight, Thursday Night Football. P.J. Locke and Aaron Patrick, two players who suffered concussions in the Broncos' Week 4 loss against the Las Vegas Raiders. They are out. And then quite possibly the biggest one of this list right now, looking at it on the offensive line where there's so many questions, right guard Quinn Meinerz, DNP all week long, short week turnaround, hamstring injury that he suffered all the way back in Week 1 is also out of this game. And not to mention there, Jonathan Cooper, hamstring, outside linebacker position right now for the Broncos, banged up. He is out as well. I'd say Quinn and PJ and Aaron Patrick are probably like really the bigger type losses that you don't have tonight on Thursday Night Football. But you know what? They have other guys that stepped up into saying Bassey and other guys that Dwayne Stukes raved about this week in his press conference. But let's get to who's questionable. In your opinion, who is the biggest player on this? There's only 3 players on the questionable list for Denver. Everyone else is full go. Who is the biggest name?
Well, Cody, that's a great question just because it feels like this list grows by the week, doesn't it? But obviously the Broncos have 3 guys questionable, Tyre Cleveland, Darius Phillips, who, like we talk about with Billy Turner, he has yet to make his Denver Broncos debut as well with a hamstring injury. A lot of hamstring injuries. It's not like it's going around. It's not a sickness, but man, there's a lot of them on the Broncos right now. 4 on this week's injury report in total. And then you have Billy Turner, of course, to me, obviously. And even though we haven't seen him play, I think the biggest name among the questionables is Billy Turner. And you can't help but wonder, what is that going to look like when he does come back? Are the Broncos satisfied with what they've seen from Graham Glasgow at right guard in place of Quinn Meinerz? Are they more satisfied with what they've seen from Cam Fleming at the right tackle position in terms of, like, would Billy Turner come back and play right guard, or would he come back and play right tackle? Because I think that's a legitimate question as of right now. We've seen a couple of games with struggles from both of those guys on the right side of the offensive line. We know that the position at right guard is going to be Quinn Meinerz when he comes back. So I would tend to think, Cody, that if Billy Turner does play, he's going to be playing that right tackle position. Maybe, I mean, it might be great timing for him. You know, I know it's a short week, but he has had the entire part of the first 4.5 weeks of this season to be getting healthy, to be getting right, to kind of be getting, it kind of sounds to me, remember when Jawan James was kind of struggling coming back from that knee? Kind of sounds like maybe a similar type of deal where it's just like you got to get your mind in that place to go out there and play an NFL game, right? Obviously, Jawan James maybe not the most favorably looked upon former Bronco. I'm not saying Billy Turner is Jawan James, but it kind of sounds like that, that mental hurdle might be the last thing he has to get over. So Tyre Cleveland, we know, though, Cody, is very valuable on special teams for the Denver Broncos, but we did see Mike Boone really step up on special teams last week as well, in the last couple weeks. So I don't know. I don't know if I think Billy Turner or Tyre Cleveland among this list. We don't know what Darius Phillips' role is going to be. to me, I'll say Billy Turner is the biggest name among the questionables.
And I think one of the bigger questions, too, when it comes to Billy Turner, Sayre, is if he were to make his debut tonight, Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime, or if you're in Denver locally, you can check it out on Denver 7. We'll have a full-on Lockdown Broncos post-game report once I get back from the stadium. Sayre and I are going to break down whatever happens tonight in primetime action. I think for Billy, the bigger question is how would he look if he were to get inserted into the starting lineup without really having much of an opportunity to play or get like practice reps with the first team offense. He hasn't been able to. He's been limited to position-specific drills through the majority of the last several weeks, and then he missed a couple of practices because he had a little bit of a flare-up. And so the knee is a tough hurdle. And and like I said, I'm glad that you brought up the Juwan James things. I've seen a couple Broncos fans, they've tweeted me and they've said, oh, Billy Turner's just like Juwan James, doesn't love football. I'm like, that you couldn't be further wrong. Like being in the locker room every day, Billy Turner loves this game. He wants to get out there more than anything. It's just, hey, when your knee is not good or not ready at that point, you can't do it. You can't force it because then you can suffer a serious injury. And it's all about getting, like as you said, getting your mind right there. And it could take some time. But you know what? The Broncos still have a good portion of the season left. And if they can get him maybe in a defining stretch of the season and he's comfortable and is that veteran guy, I don't think anybody in Broncos country is necessarily going to complain it one bit whatsoever here. But I think it's also important we throw out some of the other injuries that we've seen so far, not just on the Denver Broncos, but for the Indianapolis Colts. We do know that Jonathan Taylor will be out of tonight's matchup against this Broncos football team. Julian Blackmon, one of their top safeties, is also out with an ankle injury. Shaquille Leonard, obviously one of the NFL's best all-pro linebackers, he is out due to a concussion as well. And then they have a defensive end in Tyquan Lewis, who is also out of this matchup. So the Colts banged up just like the Denver Broncos here, and this is just one of those things. Okay, hey, Thursday Night Football. Unfortunately, we see the injuries. And for the Colts injury specifically, can the Broncos avoid falling into the trap that they did last season on Thursday Night Football heading into a matchup with the Cleveland Browns? We talk about what that trap is and how they can avoid it coming up here in just a moment. Tonight's kickoff, 6:15 p.m. Mountain Time. We'll have you covered here, Lockdown Broncos, for a post-game report. But before we do that, let me tell you about Elias, the sponsor of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. Do you ever wish that before every NFL game you could get up-to-date and accurate information before placing bets or locking in your fantasy lineup? Well, now you can with the Elias Game Plan app, the ultimate sports betting and fantasy companion for NFL, NBA, and MLB. And whether you're part of a fantasy tournament, placing bets, or you're just a huge sports fan or stats nerd, Elias Game Plan has everything that you need. Elias Game Plan is a sports app from the most trusted name in sports stats, the Elias Sports Bureau, the official statisticians of U.S. Pro Sports League since 1913. And you can see and hear their trusted facts all the time. From ESPN, local radio broadcast, television broadcast, they have you covered. But now you can have all those stats, facts, and team and player updates in the palm of your hand, all backed by their renowned research team. And with their new chat function, you can talk to them directly and receive the information you need to back your big decisions on betting or fantasy leagues. Plus, their newly added weekly survivor pool analysis keeps you in the game. So take this NFL season to the next level. Download the Elias Game Plan app today. Choose from 3 game plans when you subscribe: weekly, monthly, or annual. But I can get you 25% off your first month when you choose the monthly subscription. Just use my promo code LOCKEDONNFL25. Find Elias Game Plan Sports Betting in the App Store or Play Store today and use my promo code LOCKEDONNFL25. As we continue on today's bonus episode, Lockdown Broncos, leading Broncos country up to kickoff tonight against the Indianapolis Colts. Thursday Night Football, prime time on Amazon Prime, or locally, if you live in Denver, you can also access the game on Denver 7. Plus, you can get the Lockdown Broncos post-game recap here on the Lockdown Broncos podcast. Just want to say thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, or whether you watch us on YouTube. Thank you so much. Sayre, can the Broncos avoid falling into the trap that we saw them fall into last season against the Cleveland Browns, coming off of a matchup with the Las Vegas Raiders, heading into a short turnaround Thursday Night Football? And what I mean by that, everything kind of sets up to be the same in a sense, right? Because coming into that game, the Cleveland Browns were banged up. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, those guys were banged up and did not play. Well, guess who's not playing for the Indianapolis Colts? Jonathan Taylor, their entire workhorse of their offense. And that means that, okay, hey, Matt Ryan, the second leading rusher on the team. Nyheim Hines, their third leading rusher with only 11 total yards rushing so far this season. Oh, and former Bronco Phillip Lindsay is being called up. He's elevated to the game day active roster, and he'll play some against his former team. Can the Broncos avoid the trap?
Well, not only was Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb out of that game last year, but remember Baker Mayfield didn't play either. So everybody in Broncos country was like, man, this is like an easy dub right here. You know, we got the veteran Teddy Bridgewater out there, and we're mostly healthy by comparison. And I mean, it's just one of those things where you just can't. It's not any given Sunday because we're playing on Thursday, but these guys are NFL players, Cody. So I don't think. I mean, you can't underestimate anybody in this league. Like we mentioned in the crossover episode, the Colts have beat the Kansas City Chiefs, which I think the Broncos would kind of give an arm and a leg to be able to do one of these days upcoming. You know, obviously we got 2 matchups this season, but certainly the Indianapolis Colts are going to have enough players to go ahead and beat the Denver Broncos. I mean, you can't overlook anybody in the NFL. What this means to me is it kind of plays into the Broncos' key to victory that we talked about in the crossover episode. You want the ball in Matt Ryan's hands. And if Jonathan Taylor is not playing, every time I say his name, I want to say Jonathan Taylor Thomas. Shout out to the 90s kids. But I think that, it plays into the Broncos' strength, right? You want Matt Ryan to have to beat you in this game, to play your pass defense and to throw the ball at Pat Surtain, to have to, take those deeper drops and let your speedy pass rushers get there off the edge. It plays into your strength to not have Jonathan Taylor on the field for the Indianapolis Colts, because now you can kind of pin your ears back a little bit. If you can stop Nyheim Hines on first down, you get yourself in a favorable situation. So yes, you have to avoid this kind of dread. You and I were talking before the show. It's kind of funny. I was dead serious. I felt like the Broncos had not won a Thursday matchup since the Brock Osweiler game against the Colts when I went to go see The Force Awakens in movie theater later that night. And I was like, man, I couldn't think, but obviously we discovered the Broncos have won a couple of Thursday nights games since that 2017 matchup when Brock Osweiler came back to the team. So it's just kind of funny how like one bad memory last year against Cleveland can kind of tarnish every other Thursday matchup the Broncos have had.
Well, I mean, even going back, we totally spaced a Brett Rippon game against the Jets on Thursday Night Football, where the Broncos desperately needed to win. They got it, and that was when Jerry Jeudy Moss appeared this year. I'll always remember that game there. And then, going to 2018 when the Broncos, Bradley Chubb and Von Miller absolutely destroyed Josh Rosen. But it's like, that seems like 10 years ago from this standpoint.
Yeah.
Because the more recent, as you mentioned, the bad taste that we've all had in our mouths from Thursday Night Football as it pertains to the Broncos was them against the Browns last year in just probably the ugliest game that we could imagine. And it was like the Broncos could not move the ball downfield. It was frustrating to watch. So we will see if the Broncos can avoid the Thursday Night Football trap. Can they come into this game? And realistically, what I'm hoping for both teams, for the Broncos, for the Colts, to remain healthy, to come out of this game healthy, because having to play a game just several days after you've already played a game, in my opinion, shouldn't happen. Being around the players this week and just seeing like, hey, they're still kind of recovering from Sunday's physical game. I was like, man, this sucks. I could not imagine, as a former player myself, having to play a game in just a few days after I've already played one. So we'll see how everything goes. But one thing is for certain here, Broncos country, Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we will have you covered tonight with the Locked On Broncos post-game report. It'll go up on YouTube. It'll go up on your favorite audio podcasting platform. When I get back to the stadium, we'll have you covered on everything you need to know. We'll also react to the fallout as well of Thursday Night Football. And hey, here's to hoping that a Denver Broncos win is placed on the forefront for everybody in Broncos country. We appreciate you. We'll see you after kickoff.